Greetings, I am Herbert Erpaderp, and it was recently, or at least at the time I'm making this video, it was recently Valentine's Day, and so I built this Valentine tank. It is after all the day that we celebrate the British Valentine tank, why else would it be called that? And what better way to celebrate than to build one? This is a 1/56th or 28mm scale plastic wargaming kit from Rubicon Models. It can be used to build a Valentine Mark II, 3 close support, 4, or 5. There is also another Valentine kit from Rubicon that can be used to represent later variants of the tank. The back of the box has a few paragraphs about the Valentine and its use through the war, an image of the included decal sheet, and 3 basic painting guides. Pretty much what you would expect to see on the back of a Rubicon box, really. Inside we find sprues. There were actually more sprues than I was expecting. There are 4 of these, and the reason there are so many is because there are quite a few options in this kit. Not really surprising when you think about it though. I mean, you can build 6 marks of the tank with this. And it does mean that there are going to be quite a few things left over for the bits box, and that's always a treat. For the bits box, that is, not for me. I don't eat them or anything like that. That would be weird. If you've seen any of Rubicon's kits before, especially the newer ones, you won't be surprised when I say that the parts on these sprues look very good. They're neatly moulded and have a lot of nice crisp detail. I was not able to find any moulding defects, and the mould lines should only require a small amount of cleanup. The detail is pretty good, though you should keep in mind that this is a wargaming kit. You can use it as a display kit and it wouldn't be bad, but it is primarily aimed at wargamers, so it is going to have compromises, though all models do, really. It means there isn't going to be any fine, delicate details that would break when you handled the model while playing your games. That is not to say that it's bad, of course, quite the contrary. And once you've got the model painted, it should be a great representation of the Valentine for your battlefields. Something I like that this kit includes is slide moulding for things like the guns, though unfortunately not all of the guns. The opening for the exhaust is also slide moulded, which I think is a really nice touch. The plastic in this box gets a hearty thumbs up from me, as does the decal sheet. This is pretty much par for the course in Rubicon's kits. I don't know much about golf, so I don't know how the analogy works, but I'm trying to say that they're quite good, and there's a lot of marking options here. Most of us are probably not going to use all of these on one model, and the little bag they come in can be resealed, so these are great to keep on hand in case you need some of these markings in the future. The instruction booklet is also pretty much what I would expect from a Rubicon kit. That is to say, they're quite good. They're well laid out and easy to understand. There are callouts for the different parts that reflect different variants of the Valentine, and instructions in red that will tell you when things need to be installed first or last. They're fairly obvious being bold and red, but make sure that you're paying attention anyway. It's totally my fault, but I did manage to miss 1 or 2 of them. Something funny here that I noticed is that there is a lot of Step 1. It goes all the way up to Step 1H. Not a complaint, it's just something I found amusing. Anyway, let's glue some bits of plastic together. The first step is to take the upper hull part, which I'm sure you'll agree looks rather good, and we glue these little wall bits into place. It took me a moment or two to actually understand how these go into place. Sometimes I don't brain very well, but once you grok this, it's very easy. These will act as part of the forward-facing armour and hold the hatches in place, if you couldn't tell by looking at them. You might need to apply a little pressure to reduce gaps here, but these are easy enough to install. I then glue this front plate into place, which is about as easy as it looks, though there does seem to be a bit of a gap along the bottom of this part. I don't think that should be there, but that's what putty is for, isn't it? On the rear of the engine deck, this doors part can be installed. It's pretty simple and should be hard to install incorrectly, unless you really want to. You don't though, do you? Next, I add the muffler and exhaust part. To try and avoid making a mess with the glue, I glue the pipe to the engine area first, and then when the muffler is in place, I add glue where it joins the hull. In hindsight, this part is going to be covered, so maybe it wasn't really worth worrying about mess too much. I rather like the way the opening for the exhaust looks here. The slide moulding seems like a small detail, but it really does add a lot. Back to the rear, I add this set of fuel cans. These are the old British flimsies, but the kit does come with some jerry cans you could add as well, and I suppose you could leave these off if you prefer, but I like them so I put them on. Onto the flat part on the right side of the hull, I add this stowage box. This is good for storing tea or maybe tools or something. And just forward of that goes another very similar box, though this one has tools on top of it. And then in front of that goes this other thing. I'm not sure if this is a box or a jacking block or something, but I do know that this is where it goes. And it goes on nice and easy. I then install spare track links on the forward left side, just near the hatch. I'm pretty sure these are optional, but I add them because, well, I like spare track links. Since we're right near the openings for the hatches, why not install those? You can see these have a sort of bevel to them which should help you determine which way they go in. These are easy enough to get into place, though there's a bit of a gap around them which really doesn't look all that good when you can see the pink cutting mat through it, but it should look fine when there's only darkness in there. These are the sort of gaps I wouldn't worry about filling in. The headlamps go on next. These have a bit more plastic to them than they really should. The space below the round lampy bit is a bracket and not a flat plate, but this is fine for me. And I believe you can leave these off if you prefer. This is one of those compromises I mentioned earlier. I thought it was a bit strange that the instructions didn't tell us to put the front of the lamps in place now, but that does come later, just in case you think I forgot. The next step is to install the cover over the muffler. I make sure to use plenty of glue here so that the part stays in place, also so the glue god will smile upon me and bless my bonds. I follow this by gluing the lower hull to the upper hull. The fit at the front looks a bit weird, but apparently that's how the hull of the Valentine looks, so this is fine. The hull parts more or less lock together, so it is hard to get this wrong. I add plenty of glue where the parts join together so that they stay together, and then I have a sensible chuckle about how the front of the hull looks a bit like a sad face. The sides of the lower hull part, where the running gear joins the hull, are separate parts. This is a bit unusual, but not a bad thing. The drive sprocket goes into place here, and then I assemble the brake thing. I'm pretty sure this entire assembly is brake related. The fins that I'm adding around this part are for cooling the brakes. It makes for an interesting looking drive sprocket. That assembly glues into place quite easily, and it doesn't have any keying because, well, it doesn't really need it, does it? There are shackles that go on either end of the hull side parts, and these are easy to install. A little nudging so they look like they're hanging downwards and being affected by gravity, and they're done. Very nice. Now to build the suspension units. These are fairly simple to put together. They're just 2 parts each, with handy-dandy guide pins to make sure everything lines up nicely, though they are different parts, so do be sure to pay attention to the instructions when building them. I suggest only clipping out the parts for the one that you're building, rather than all of the parts. That way you remove the possibility of accidentally gluing the wrong parts together. They look pretty good once they're together, and there are 4 of them in total, 2 for each side.
Oh really, Herbert?
Yeah, really. Before we can add the suspension units, we need to install the lower hull sides that we assembled earlier. This is pretty easy, they just glue right onto the sides. There's keying, which makes it really easy. I did make a mistake here though. The instructions tell you to glue the side on, add the rear plate, and then glue the other side on. Guess who failed to read that instruction? That's right, good old Herbert. I did get lucky though. I was able to pull the right side part away a bit because I guess I didn't use enough glue and it wasn't quite bonded yet, and I installed the rear plate. This is easy, and it pretty much just slides right into place. Then I add more glue and press the side part properly into place. Sometimes you just get lucky, and fixing your mistakes is easy. That's probably used up all of my good luck for the year though. Now that's done, it's time to install the suspension units. You should pay attention to the instructions to figure out how these should be installed. The sort of cone-shaped arm bit that will hold the bigger wheel on each unit should face outward, which is to say the forward one has the large wheel towards the front, and on the rear it's facing rearward. These are really easy to place, owing to the guide pin and recessed part that's shaped like the upper part of the unit. Once those are in place, I think they look rather good. For some reason, at this point it's time to add the front of the headlamps. You get a choice here, a plain old lens, or the covered lamp with the little slit in it. You can tell which one I've chosen. These lamp front parts have a little nub on the inside which works as keying. There's that sad face again. Now the time for wheels is upon us. This pile is missing 2 of the larger wheels because I can't count, but you can see what they look like. There is a choice between two kinds of wheels here, so check the instructions to figure out which type of wheel the variant which you're building used. Unsurprisingly, gluing the wheels into place is really easy. See what I did there? That's a new little joke for you. Anyway, this is easy, though there is a little bit of play in the fit, so you might need to eyeball things to get them neat and straight. Not only do we need wheels on those suspension units, we also need idler wheels at the front. This is the same kind of wheel as the larger ones we just installed, and it's easy enough to do. Eventually all 14 wheels are in place and it's looking really good. There's that new joke again. The tank isn't going to get too far without tracks, so it's time to add those. These are really easy to put on. They just slide right over the wheels, and the guide horns and a couple of pins for the return rollers will hold them in place. I did need to apply a little bit of inward pressure so that they would be in the correct position, but that's easy enough to do. I like how they did these tracks. They're rather good. Mudguards come next, and these are optional. Not only that, but there are two choices here. You could use the ones like I'm installing here, which the instructions say are for later tanks and Russian Lend-Lease vehicles. There's also a set that comes with side skirts. The rear mudguards are very easy to get into place. The ones at the front aren't too hard either, but they are two parts, so you've got to line those up, and I found the one on the right had a bit of a gap, despite my best efforts. The one on the left ended up looking much better. I wouldn't consider this to be a big issue, and it can be dealt with later with some putty if need be. And that's it for the hull, unless you want to add some of the stowage. I will probably add those rolls you see on the sprue earlier, I just forgot to do so while building this. Now it's time to build the turret. I started by gluing the guns into the mantlet part because, well, it seemed like a sensible way to do things. Obviously I'm making sure that I've got the machine gun the right way up. It would be silly to put that on upside down, wouldn't it? Then the 2-pounder main gun goes in. Unfortunately, this isn't one of the guns with the slide molded barrel. I'm not really sure why that is. I suppose if it really bothered me, I could have used the 3-inch howitzer for the close support variant. That gun barrel is slide molded and the turret is the same. Still, it looks good anyway. I then insert that gun assembly into the turret front, making sure that it's around the right way. The machine gun should be on the tank's right. And then I glue the backing part into place. The instructions do suggest a more careful gluing to allow the gun to elevate and depress, but I don't need that option, so I used a lot of glue. That way the glue god will smile upon me, and everything will be bonded into place. I then glue the turret front onto the turret ring. It's a good idea to double check and be sure that you are using the correct parts here. It can be easy to mix things up. I accidentally tried to add the wrong turret side parts, realizing that they were wrong because they didn't really fit. So I guess that saved me before I made a gluey mess. I glue the left side of the turret into place, which is as it should be. The red note in the instructions does say to assemble this part first. I add the turret rear part next, which is fine and dandy, and it goes into place easily, though there is a bit more of a gap than I wanted where it joins the left side wall. Here is where I encountered a problem, though it is kind of a problem with my ability to follow instructions, and not so much with the model. I added the right side of the turret and then tried to fit the roof. It didn't. I'm not sure why this doesn't work, it just doesn't. Even without the right side of the turret in place, I had to apply quite a bit of pressure to get the roof to fit properly, and even then I would say that it didn't quite end up perfect. I add the right turret side, and then apply a bunch more pressure. It didn't turn out too bad, and this is riveted construction, so those little gappy bits are probably mostly fine, though there is going to need to be some filling done. This was an unusually difficult turret to put together for a Rubicon model. Not that it was super hard, it's just that they're usually a bit easier. It was at this point that I realised that I would need to drill a hole in the roof if I wanted to install the optional Bren gun, so I opted to omit it. I then glued the stowage box for the rear of the turret together, which is just as easy as it looks. And then, why not install that on the turret? There's a couple of large slots that it mounts into, and after a bit of nudging to get the positioning right, it looks good. The final step is to install the hatch, which I am, as usual, modelling closed. You can see there's a nice little basket in here to hold the commander figure if you choose to use that, and one of the cool things about this kit is that you get a Commonwealth and a Soviet commander. Obviously I've chosen neither, but the choice is good to have. The 3 hatch parts go on in a specific order, and for once I managed to follow those instructions and not mess things up. That's a very good looking hatch, and 1 completed turret, which can be added to the hull using the locking tabs. And with that, the 28mm scale plastic Valentine tank, in this case a Mark V, from Rubicon Models, is completed. And I'm pretty happy with how this has turned out. As you can see, it looks quite a bit like a Valentine tank, which is just what I wanted. It's going to need a bit of putty in some places before it gets painted, but nothing too serious. The detail is pretty good. Of course, I'm no Valentine scientist, so I can't point out how accurately this represents a Mark V, but I would say that it's fairly decent, though it is primarily a wargaming piece, so there are going to be some compromises in order to make the model sturdy enough to endure being handled a lot. There are always compromises in all models in all scales that you'll find, just to make them practical to mold. I probably don't need to mention any of that to most of you, but there's always somebody that just doesn't get it. The model has a purpose, and it fulfills that purpose very well. Maybe I'm waffling a bit now. Anyway, I really enjoyed building this. I mean, the turret was a bit annoying and fiddly, but I have certainly encountered worse. For the most part, all of the bits went together nice and easily, and I didn't have to do a whole lot of cleanup. This is pretty typical of Rubicon's models. They're designed quite well, and there are very rarely any issues. In fact, the admittedly minor problems I did encounter in this build are mostly because I wasn't paying quite enough attention to the instructions. So I would like to suggest paying a little bit more attention to those. Despite that, I got the model done and it looks quite good, so I certainly could have done worse. As with pretty much all of the models I build in my videos, I filmed this one live on stream. This does involve a fair bit of distraction and chatting with the folks in chat. I mean, that's what chat is for, and that is a lot of fun, but it does mean that it takes me a bit longer to get the models built than somebody who's not being distracted with things like filming and chatting and making notes. This Valentine took me about 3 hours of stream time to get done, which isn't too bad really. If you'd like to watch me build kits like this live on stream, head over to my Twitch channel and give me a follow. There's a link in the description. I'll be starting on the Rubicon King Tiger pretty soon, which is probably relevant if you're interested in this kit. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to put those in the comment section below. If you've built one of these or any other cool models and you want to share, why not drop by our Discord community and show us some pictures? I'd love to see what you've done. And if you've not already done so, why not subscribe, follow, ring the bell, become a patron if you want to see my videos a bit early, or maybe just come say hi on Discord or Twitch when I'm live. Links to all of my things are in the description below, and, as always, I shall return soon. So, until then, be excellent to each other, and thanks for watching. Farewell.